Kenyan President William Ruto urges warring generals to stop fighting. Life-saving equipment looted from hospitals in Sudan. Plus, Malawi authorities say refugee homes are to be made. Hello and welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. I'm Anne Mwawadu. Kenyan President William Ruto has once again called out the two warring Sudanese generals, asking them to stop fighting and to stop the fighting that has entered its second month. Intense battles in the capital Khartoum and its sister cities of Bahri and Omdurman have raged despite Saudi and U.S. brokered talks between the army and the RSF in Jeddah aimed at securing humanitarian access and a ceasefire. But the Kenyan leader, who's been tasked by regional bloc IGAD, also together with other heads of state to help in reconciling Sudan's rival sides, said the military capacity was for battling criminals and terrorists and not for fighting children and women. Mr. Ruto, however, blamed African states for lacking the capacity to stop the war in Sudan. Nearly 1,000 people have been killed and more than 1 million displaced since battles between the army and the RSF began, and between the two leaders who lead the paramilitary force and the one from the army erupted in the month of April this year. Meanwhile, anti-aircraft guns and drones could be heard in the Sudanese capital, Khartoum. Videos posted by the RSF show fighters around the Air Defense Forces command site of Khartoum shooting in the air and walking around destroyed military vehicles. The Sudanese army has been using airstrikes and shelling in a bid to root out the RSF fighters who are entrenched in residential areas of Khartoum. Across Sudan, the fighting has uprooted around 1 million people and 220,000 of whom have fled into neighboring states. The regional director for International Committee of the Red Cross, Patrick Youssef, says the agreement between the warring parties of Sudan last week to protect civilians have failed to silence the guns. The deal was intended to allow peace passage for people leaving the battle zones, protect relief workers, and prevent civilians being used as human shields. But according to Mr. Youssef, it has not brought out any tangible change. Mr. Youssef adds that allowing Khartoum Airport to accept humanitarian aircraft to help Sudanese civilians will be an immense game changer. He also says that there were injured people in Darfur who had no access to hospitals and basic services. The United Nations World Food Programme is rapidly scaling up its own emergency operations in Sudan every day, reaching thousands of more people whose lives have been upended by the ongoing conflict. The WFP airlift carrying 30 metric tons of humanitarian cargo has arrived in Port Sudan, the first shipment to arrive by air since the conflict broke out earlier this year. And so far, the WFP has fed more than 300,000 people in Sudan alone. It also is ramping up to assist 4.9 million vulnerable people in Sudan and thousands more who have fled to neighboring countries.
People are leaving Khartoum because there's no food, no water, no electricity, and there is very high levels of insecurity. People are leaving. I was in a refugee reception center yesterday on the border where people have walked for 4, 5, 6 days from Khartoum. I met a woman, Rebecca. She'd left with 21 children. She was sitting in this reception site with virtually nothing, only what she'd been able to carry. And she didn't really know what comes next. WFP is providing hot meals. WFP will continue to support refugees as and when they arrive. But the future is very bleak for those people. It is bleak for Sudan, and it is bleak for the region.
The political advisor of the paramilitary group Rapid Support Force, Izzat Youssef, has said they are now committed to peace talks in Saudi Arabia. Fighting in Sudan began over a month ago after disputes over plans for the RSF to join the country's army and the future chain of command under an internationally backed deal for a political transition towards civilian rule. He also spoke after he met with South Sudanese President Salva Kiir, saying that the RSF welcomed efforts by the neighboring country to help bring an end to the conflict. He denied allegations that the group was using civilians as shields. Izzat blamed the persistent clashes on Sudan armed forces for breaking a recent ceasefire. The charity Save the Children is warning that armed groups are occupying hospitals in Sudan and looting life-saving equipment. The charity said earlier this week that 8 people who were on oxygen in a health facility in the capital Khartoum were driven out by militia fighters. It also said that 3 clinics for internally displaced people in the Darfur region were looted and emptied of their supplies. The United Nations is urgently seeking about $3 billion to fund humanitarian operations right there in Sudan. It is expecting more than 1 million people to flee the country as fighting continues between the army and the rival militia forces. In the meantime, the Sudanese army has published a video showing its leader, Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, walking among cheering soldiers at an unknown location in the capital, Khartoum. The rare 23-second video shows General Burhan armed with a rifle and a pistol. He is seen clad in a military outfit, shaking hands with cheering soldiers. And this is the first video of its kind since the ongoing armed conflict began on April the 15th between the army and the RSF. However, in the early days of this fighting, General Burhan was seen together with other military leaders commanding soldiers from inside an unknown building in Khartoum. Both the army chief and his rival RSF Commander General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo had sought to boost the morale of their respective battling forces. Hemeti also made a similar appearance in an unknown location in Khartoum, where he recently denied in an audio message that he was killed. Let's take you away from Sudan now. Malawi authorities have raided the homes of businesses of refugees and asylum seekers operating in the capital to force them to relocate to a camp some 40 kilometers north of the city. Officers from the Malawi police and the Department of Immigration rounded up more than 300 refugees and asylum seekers, mostly from Burundi and Ethiopia, and are currently holding them in jail while waiting for their own relocation to the Zaleka refugee camp. Malawian laws prohibit refugees and asylum seekers from staying outside a refugee camp. Homeland Security Minister Ken Zikale Ngoma has the past said that there was no reason for the refugees to leave their designated camps, which he said has facilities that meet international standards, including primary and secondary schools, healthcare, and a public market. The refugees, however, disagree, saying that they prefer to live out inside the city, away from the camp, where there are better business opportunities and schools for their children. Meanwhile, rescue teams in Malawi have recovered 6 more bodies of people who went missing after their boat was hit by a hippo and capsized in the Shire River in the southern Nsanje region. The police public spokesperson in that area, Agnes Zalakoma, said the bodies were recovered from different sites along the river. Ms. Zalakoma said the search is still in progress. Following that incident, 14 people were rescued and about 20 others are still reported missing. A body of an infant who was among the passengers was recovered earlier. The boat was packed with 37 villagers who were crossing the river to work in their fields in the Mozambican side. Let's speak to Christy Gomani, a Malawian journalist, to find out the latest going on in that region. Hello, thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you very much this afternoon, I would say.
All right, so for an accident like this, where a hippo caused a boat to capsize, did it come as a surprise to you, or does it happen often?
Actually, this does not happen often, and there are 2 ways. One came as a surprise because, just like I've indicated, that it doesn't happen oftenly, and 2, it did not come as a surprise because the Chile River is one of the biggest, and not one of, but is the biggest river in the country, which taps water from Lake Malawi via Mozambique. And the people from Nsanje, the area that has been affected, they normally, because they are in the border, they use that frequently. that is their only means of survival when they are going to their farms or others to schools, to churches, various activities. So the route remains the water. So it came as a surprise because it does not happen. This is their normal route, and it did not surprise me because the hippos are always there in the water.
All right, we know the latest is that 6 bodies have been recovered. An infant was also recovered earlier. But give us an update of the current situation. Is there any more news about that, as it stands now?
Actually, as we speak, from the 37 that were involved from the day that this tragedy happened, we are talking about 18 that are still missing. Talking of 6 that have been found dead, and the 1 infant that was also found dead at that particular day. So as we speak, the Department of Marine, led by the district council authorities, are still searching for the other bodies that are still missing as we speak. And an intervention has already been given thus far, talking about the state president, Lazarus Chakwera, through his Minister of Water and Sanitation, because the minister also resides in the Lower Shire where the incident happened. So they went there to cheer those that survived, and also those that are their relatives are still missing. So far, those are the interventions that have taken place, but the rescue operation is still underway.
Talking about the survivors, those who were brought out of this boat mishap, what is the condition for them now? Have they been hospitalized and reunited with their families, or what's going on at the moment with them, health-wise?
Actually, on the very first day that the incident happened, they were taken to hospital, but then after further examinations, they were released. Many of them were not injured as physically, and mentally when they were examined, I think most of them looked okay, and they have reunited with their families. The Minister of Water and Sanitation visited the scene. That was 2 days ago. One of the survivors managed to talk to the press and narrated the story to those that visited them, how it happened and how they have tried to cope up. And I would believe, because these people are used to traveling on water, I think when such incidences happen, they have seen such before, although we would say that death has never been a friend to humankind. But when such things happen, I think they would easily cope up than unlike those that do not stay closer to the river in mention.
And now this is a 3rd deadly accident, and for this one, a hippo actually capsized his boat. Is there anything authorities are doing in terms of trying to get people out of that area, or make sure that people do not go through that route or that channel on the water, even when they are crossing with their boats?
Actually, what I would say, there's been a proposal that perhaps there should be a way whether to relocate the hippos, because they are saying the argument is that the population is high, the population of the hippos. So the suggestion is that maybe they should relocate or find a way to depopulate to the area, because it's more of a route of human beings, and to have hippos, it's a threat. So that proposal, we are yet to see how the authorities are going to respond to that. But as we speak, it's business as usual. Just like I've said earlier, that this is for businesses to happen. In the area, they use this route. But one thing that has also been noted to maybe have caused this, not causing as such, but to have played a role in this, right. Maybe those that when the boat had capsized, maybe they would have come in others to rescue them. But the thing is, Yeah,
All
these
right,
people, they
Christy
operate.
Kumani. Thank you very much for your time. Yeah, we're out of time already, but thank you very much. I hope you will stay safe and that is sorted as soon as possible. Thanks a lot, Christy Gomani, Malawian journalist, for your time on Network Africa. After the break, in just a moment, workers at the National Museum in Lagos restore bronze artifact. To bring you the details, please stay with us. Thank you very much for staying with us. You're still watching Network Africa. A 9-year-old girl fell to her death in Zimbabwe while running away from traditional Nyau dancers who were performing at a school in Mavuku, a suburb east of the capital, Harare. Police say the child died and investigations into her death are in progress. The Nyau dancers, also known as Vigor or is it Tandari and Shona, often scare children with their cryptic dances and costumes. Apart from their fascinating dances, they are associated with many myths among their adults, but to young children, they're more like monsters. Nyau dancers belong to the Chewa community in northwestern Zimbabwe. The ethnic group is also found in Malawi and in Zambia. The dancers assist in passing down the culture and the history of the Chewa people. The head of Kenya's standards regulator and 26 other government officials have been suspended over the release of 1,000 tons of expired sugar into the market. A statement by the head of public service, Felix Kuseki, said that 20,000 bags of sugar imported into the country in the year 2018 and condemned by the regulator had been irregularly diverted and unprocedurally released into the market. The Kenyan Bureau of Standards had then declared the sugar as unfit for human consumption, and it was set for destruction through conversion to industrial ethanol. The conversion was to be undertaken jointly by regulatory agencies. They were required to source for a distiller through an open and competitive tendering process and then pay all the necessary taxes and fees. The suspension comes at a time when Kenyans have been hit by one of the biggest rise in prices of sugar in years amid a shortage. A company executive said that South Africa's state power utility Eskom may have to increase power cuts to an unprecedented level this winter as the country grapples with its worst power crisis on record. Many households and businesses in Africa's most industrialized economy are already facing scheduled electricity outages of more than 10 hours in just one day, largely due to breakdowns in Eskom's ailing fleet of coal power stations. The gap between supply and demand is expected to increase in the coming winter months as people turn on their heaters, putting additional pressure on the grid. Eskom Group Executive in Transmission Sugomoko Shepherd said that this is going to be a very difficult winter. Eskom has not yet gone beyond Stage 6 power cuts, which require 6,000 megawatts to be shared from the national grid. And this winter, it may move up to Stage 8, and Shepherd said that it will require up to 8,000 megawatts to be shared, translating to 16 hours of outages in a 32-hour cycle. Stage 8 is just one scenario that Eskom is preparing for. Its interventions are not effective, explaining the power cuts are necessary in order to avoid a grid collapse.
We're going into this winter with 3,000 megawatts less capacity than we had during the last winter. The 3 units of Kusile plus the 1 unit of Kuburg. However, the focus during this winter, first and foremost, must be the performance of the generation fleet around the energy availability factor.
We may have up to Stage 8 load shedding if our interventions to reduce demand and improve reliability are not effective. So it's a risk-based kind of assessment. And what we are indicating is that the base case is up to 15,000 megawatts, in which case, as you will note, according to the table, we're going to have load shedding ranging between Stage 3 and Stage 5. National control all the way down to the municipalities that we manage supply and demand. If we go up to 18,000 megawatts of breakdowns, there is a likelihood that we would be at Stage 7, load shedding and potentially even stage 8, especially when you go into July and August when demand is higher. So this is going to be a very difficult winter.
The most crowded market in Tanzania, located in the economic capital, Dar es Salaam, has been paralyzed by the closure of more than 1,000 stores for the third consecutive day in protest against a new tax, which the government will submit to a moratorium. In an unprecedented move in the East African country, traders in the Kariakoo market have not opened. In this way, they are able to create a new culture of peace and harmony in the world and to create a new way of life for the people. Prime Minister Kassim Majaliwa said we pay a lot of taxes, but the closure was prompted by the demand to register our stores and pay the new tax on stores. The Prime Minister announced a moratorium on the collection of tax and the creation of a 14-member committee composed of government members and traders. He also asked the police to concentrate on the security of the people and their property. At the opening of this meeting, which was also attended by ministers and officials of the tax administration, Kassim Majaliwa also assured to be attentive to the claims of these traders. The Igbo-Ukwu, which dates back to the 9th century, were discovered in 1939 in southeastern Anambra State, part of the region inhabited by the Igbo people. Some of the artifacts, including design bowls, pots, vases, and shells, and our workers at that National Museum in Lagos are restoring these artifacts. We have more in this report.
At the National Museum in Lagos, workers carefully remove rust and patina from Igbo-Ukwu bronze artifacts, part of restoration work on some of Nigeria's oldest but lesser-known collections.
The Igbo-Ukwu objects, they are alloy of copper, brass and lead, and so they are very susceptible to corrosion. The main purpose for restoration work is to stabilize bronze objects against corrosion.
Their restoration comes at a time when there is uncertainty about the return of thousands of the more famous Benin bronzes from museums and collectors abroad. In March, President Muhammadu Buhari decreed that all returned Benin bronzes that were looted from the ancient kingdom should be in the custody of a royal ruler in modern-day Benin City, southwestern Nigeria. That led a British university to return more than 100 artifacts. At the museum in Lagos, curator Omotayo Adeboye says she considers the Igbo-Ukwu masterpieces of creativity and indigenous craftsmanship.
The main challenge we have in the museum is having a standard conservation laboratory with modern equipment for conservation. So we are looking forward to the trainings coming with these grants and the equipment that we are going to be getting.
The Bank of America provided a grant for the restoration of the artifacts. The National Museum has a collection of 200 Igbo-Ukwu pieces, and more are housed in other local museums.
Well, on that note, we end Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawado.